Hey YouTube, hey subscribers, thanks for tuning in. This is a video that I've been sitting on for a long time, mainly because of the controversial nature of the subject. It's sure to pull out some of the ugliest comments you've probably ever seen come across my channel, and I'll do my best to monitor them, but some of them I will leave up just so you can see that what I'm telling you is true. And most of them I'll leave up so you can see the nature of the thought process. And so you can see how ugly these individuals get. Anytime you talk about them, they won't take the time to listen to the disclaimers. They definitely won't take the time to listen to the video in its entirety because it's too cutting and it's too true. But those that actually do and go ahead and comment typically have very, very nasty things to say in regard to the subject. So what is this subject? Today we're going to talk about the misguided members of MGTOW, or MGTOW, depending on how you pronounce it. And that stands for Men Going Their Own Way. If you've never heard of this movement, you would do yourself well to do a quick Google search and just kind of upskill yourself on what this is and what it means. In short, it is a movement that started by a group of men who felt violated by the family court system, and in many different cases that I've read, really were violated in many different ways. And they started this movement in an effort to get other men, in particular young men, to think through their life in a different way that doesn't involve marriage and family and children. Believe it or not, guys, I actually don't disagree with that in its entirety. I think a lot of young people, because they don't know what else to do, plunge headfirst into the biggest commitment that you could ever make in life. There are lots of things that are commitments, but you can get out of almost every single one of them. You can even get out of a marriage and a family, but not without a lot of collateral damage as a result, and also not without a lot of financial damage as a result. So I'm actually all for the idea of people coming out of high school, taking a gap year, exploring life, figuring out what it is that they want, then maybe going to college or going to a trade school or going into something and kind of establishing themselves as people first before they try to make the ultimate establishment of marriage and family. I think that's why a lot of these relationships end up in the tubes, because everyone is just blindly going into it, and then the folks that have been there already aren't giving the guidance and advice that's really necessary. So they're not going to their young people and saying, hey, you maybe should wait a little bit. Why don't you wait until at least you finish college, or wait till you finish your trade school, wait till you come back from the military, and then start thinking through those things. But as is the nature of love and life, people fall in love. They think they're so old at age 18, 21, and they want to go ahead and get started on their life because they think they're so old, and then they end up in divorce court. So I think there's a lot of different ways that these relationships fail cataclysmically. And I actually agree with that premise. I don't think it's just men that should try going their own way. I think women should try it too. I'm not saying be without a marriage, without a family, and without children for life. I'm saying put it off a little bit. So with all that said, let's do a few more disclaimers before I get into this topic. This video is not directed at all members of MGTOW, okay? I'm gonna say that one more time. This video is not directed at all members of MGTOW. This video is directed at those members who are misguided. So the movement itself has divided out into two factions. The original faction, which was those men who had been violated in the family court system and who just wanted a fair shake in that system, and who are now encouraging other young men to explore other avenues of life before settling down in a marriage. This video is not for you. This video is to that defunct, misguided faction who not only are not interested in the marriage and family, but who also are encouraging young men and men in general to seek out and utilize women for their disposal, for their use and disposal. And if you think I'm making that up, all you have to do is find your way to a MGTOW comment board and you'll see what I'm telling you is the truth. So why this video right now? Recently in San Bernardino, unfortunately, a teacher lost her life, as well as one of her 8-year-old students, and her estranged husband then killed himself. Now, we don't know all the details of this story. We know enough to know that nothing ever warrants that. Nothing ever warrants going into somebody's workplace and shooting the whole place up because you can't take no, because you're having a tough time with rejection. But what struck me and what made me want to go ahead and do this video was, as I'm reading more and more about this story, this gentleman posted a video, and apparently he had done a few, but I only saw one video on his Facebook page talking about how much he loves his wife, how she's the best thing that ever happened to him, and apparently they just got married about 2 months ago in January, 2 or 3 months ago. The gentleman was 53, and it looks like the woman, the teacher, I believe she was also 53. These are two seasoned adults who found each other and decided to get married a couple months ago. So all things appear to be fine on the surface. He's even going as far as to post Facebook videos, singing her praises and talking about how much he loved her. Now, and then when you look at the picture of the guy, he actually looks like a normal guy, and that's what's super scary about this. Now, in fairness, because neither one of them can defend themselves, we don't know what happened in this relationship. What we do know is that nothing ever warrants that ultimate resolution. We know that much. So why do I bring that up in this context on this channel with the title of the video, The Misguided Members of MGTOW? If, and I still might do a dig, if they don't remove all this guy's stuff from the internet first, I'm going to just do a little bit of searching to see if I can find anything or anywhere that he participated in, like comment sections or group discussions, because I guarantee you, I could almost bet money that he holds dear to his heart, or held dear to his heart, some of the principles and values of these misguided members of this movement. And that inability to break out of that mindset is ultimately what led him to destroy her physically and destroy himself and a child, an innocent child that had nothing to do with this. So let's talk a little bit about what's embedded in that mindset and how it can lead to this level of violence. So again, this whole movement is divided out into two factions: the original group that actually feels wronged, and this secondary group who has taken the original objectives and purposes of the movement and perverted it and converted it into something that it's not supposed to be. So basically, what it has become is a factory for breeding male narcissists. So if the seeds of narcissism were already in there, this movement waters those seeds and sends them out into the world to wreak all kinds of havoc and destruction on the women of the world, young, old, and middle-aged. Oh, and by the way, this particular group has completely written off middle-aged women, completely. I think they're saying is anything over 30 is expired or something like that. So real delightful bunch, real charming bunch. And my question to them is always the same. Does that mean your mother has expired? I'm just asking. If any woman over the age of 30 has expired, does that mean your mom has expired? What about your grandmother? All right, let's get into some of their characteristics. This is a uniquely arrogant bunch. So what do I mean by that? When you go through and read some of the things that they write about women, their anger lies in the fact that women reject them. And then they go on to list out all the reasons why they shouldn't be rejected. They'll say things like, I don't have a criminal record. I have a full-time job. I have my own place. I don't live with my mom and dad. Sometimes they have good credit scores. So they'll say, I have a good credit score. So they start listing out all these things that actually have nothing to do with being a good person, actually has more to do with just being a responsible adult. And they want a pat on the back for being a responsible adult. What I never see them list out in these lists, and by the way, the fact that they're making a list implies that a woman has no right to say no to that list. Like anyone who sees this list should automatically say yes to them. But what's never included are character traits. I never see any of them write things like, I like to be honest, or, I'm a very fair person, very reciprocal, I believe in balance. Like you never see them say those types of things, the character traits. All they list off are the responsible adult traits that I guess all women are supposed to jump out of their skin for. And then when a woman says, well, no, thank you, because keep in mind, guys and girls, a woman's no can mean many things. So, but these guys don't see it that way. They see it as, I'm a catch, I'm a prize, and any woman should respond positively to me. And if she doesn't, something's wrong with her, and then she's worthy of all this critique and criticism that I'm getting ready to hand down. They don't believe in a woman's no. So from what I've gathered from this San Bernardino story is they were estranged. So apparently she left about a month or month and a half or so after being married to this guy. And again, this is just me speculating, can't say for sure, but I guarantee he didn't take that well. I'm sure his true colors came out right after they got married. She saw something maybe she hadn't seen before. Maybe she had and she didn't want to believe it. Who knows? Either way, this woman felt the need to separate herself from this man, and he couldn't handle it. And it's a classic case of, if I can't have you and you won't be with me, well, then nobody can, because these members are also incredibly selfish, extremely selfish. It's all about them. They're always thinking of new and creative ways to be served by either the woman or the women, depending on how many they're actually able to dupe into their rotation. They're extremely selfish individuals. They have a difficult time thinking outside of their box, their little box that they live in. And then anyone who tries to act independently of their selfish wishes, wants, needs, and desires has hell to pay, basically. And it can turn violent sometimes, as we've seen here recently, but it happens all the time all across the country. So let's kind of continue on that theme of selfish and talk about how entitled this particular group is. And again, I'm going to stop and say I'm not talking about all men, and I'm not even talking about the actual original group of MGTOW members who were wronged by the family court system. I feel sorry for you. I'm sorry that happened to you. Your original group and your original intent is getting distorted and destroyed by these other members that you've allowed into this group. So let's talk about how entitled they are. These men are entitled when it comes to women, and probably in all areas of life, but we'll just stay focused in a couple different ways. Number one, they feel entitled to her body, all right? And I could do a whole separate video on that, but I'll keep it in here. They feel entitled to her body, and if she marries him, then she officially becomes his property, meaning she no longer has the right to say no. She's actually forfeited her right to say no to him. You see this come out in the form of marital rape. It's a thing. Google it. I can't tell you how many debates and arguments I've gotten into in comment boards, in groups, on Facebook, with individuals, these types of men, telling me that a woman has no right to say no to her husband sexually. She cannot refuse him. Almost like in the vows, it says, and you agree to never sexually refuse this man. Yes, I do. Okay. It doesn't say that, or vice versa. But they feel entitled to her body, especially if you're the wife. But even when you're the girlfriend, even when you're just recently dating and getting to know each other, they feel entitled to sexual gratification. They've even started something else that was born out of this movement, called forced loneliness, where essentially they blame the woman and the women of the world for things just like San Bernardino. So I guarantee you, somewhere in some comment board, one of these guys is saying, I bet you she wouldn't sleep with him. I bet you she refused to have sex with him. And then they go so far as to try to shame you into seeing why that's wrong. So they'll say things like, ladies, we men have needs. You guys can't deny us that kind of stuff, or we get violent or we get crazy. So basically, when a man decides to go and violently murder someone because he's been told no or because he's been denied sex, it's women's fault. Totally justified. It's completely a woman's fault. And, you know, it's all because of this forced loneliness thing. So the official definition for forced loneliness, it's called true forced loneliness, TFL, is making the rounds on YouTube. The proponents of TFL claim they are being forced to be lonely because of society's judgmental culture of high expectations in courtship. This in turn causes men to be left without mates. Now, I haven't dug really deep into that movement, but it makes the assumption that somebody is denying you something that you are owed. And that's where the entitlement part comes in. But these men feel like sex and a woman's attention is also something that they're entitled to. They don't see it as an option or a choice. They don't see it as all women everywhere have the option of whether or not they want to be with me. They can't handle that, because for someone to say, no, I don't choose your option, it obliterates the entirety of their personhood, because they, in their minds, as Patricia Evans would say in her book, Controlling People, they've made themselves up from the outside in. So it has to work. It has to be correct. It has to be accepted by others, or else I've made myself up wrong. And I can't be wrong about that. So when other people look over what they're offering and say, no, thank you, they take it as an affront to their entire being. And then that's when that woman usually gets cursed out, called names, you know, told she's going to be lonely forever. Like, how childish. Like, you show your true colors as soon as you hear no. And that's why I'm a firm advocate that you have to use your no and use it often, and use it in a variety of different situations, because oftentimes you won't know who you're dealing with until you say no. I have a quote. It's a little harsh, so trigger warning for those of you listening, but a lot of people are living with rapists, but they don't know it because they've never said no. So you don't know you're living with a rapist because you've never told him no. And I'm not encouraging you to start now, because your safety could be in jeopardy. But my point is, there are individuals in your life who are actually pretty dangerous, but because you're compliant and because you always go along with what they want or what they say, you don't know it and you don't recognize the level of danger. But that danger comes out of this entitled mindset. When someone takes something from you that you believe is yours and you believe is owed to you, most people don't just roll over and go, oh, well, guess I lost that one. I'd sure like to have that back, but oh, well, guess it's theirs now. No, you fight for it. You fight for the things that you believe are yours, the things that you believe are your right or that you're entitled to. They fight for women's bodies and women's company in the exact same way. And then here's the irony of it, though. These members also are very fickle, wishy-washy, flap in the wind type people. The target is always moving. There is no satisfying them. So they feel entitled to women's bodies, right? They've started this whole forced loneliness movement, right? But then when they meet women who will actually accommodate them sexually and accommodate them in terms of keeping them company, they call them sluts and whores. So it's almost like a woman can't win. Hypocrites. When you're dealing with this type of person, nobody wins. Nobody comes out the winner when you're dealing with this type of man. So it's all about, and it all comes back to that selfishness thing. It's all about me, my needs, my wants, my wishes, my desires. No one else's needs, wants, wishes, or desires have merit. They have no weight. They pale in comparison to my needs, wishes, wants, and desires. And I'm going to act on mine regardless of the impact that they have on my family, me, all of those things. Finally, the final trademark characteristic of these guys is a very marked lack of personal accountability and responsibility. And one of the major ways that this comes out with these individuals is in their discussion of single parenthood, and in particular, single mothers. They hate single mothers with a flaming passion. These guys really believe in their minds that these women got pregnant by themselves and like want single parenthood, or like wanted single parenthood, like they opted for it, they chose it. I've even seen some of them write things like, you know, women drive the men away and then get mad when they become single parents. But when you start to peel back the layers of driving them away and what caused them to be driven away, it's amazing how deep the rabbit hole goes when you start to pull back all those layers of dirt. But I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to point out that this is a two-person situation. Regardless of how a mom or a mother becomes a single mother, she still didn't get pregnant by herself. And that is always the only point that I'm ever making. She didn't do it by herself. She needed help to get pregnant. Their counter argument is always the same thing, and it's annoying because I would really, really like to have a different argument for once. But again, knowing what we know about narcissists, they don't have much in their arsenal. So they lean on the same 3 or 4 arguments because that's all they have. I've got dozens, and I've just been waiting for one mind who doesn't have 3 arguments inside to talk to me, and let's have a discussion. And let's really get down to the heart of this matter, because their argument always is, she didn't have to have the baby. So basically what these men want is women who won't force them into forced loneliness, to give up their bodies, have sex with them at will and enthusiastically, have sex unprotected at will and enthusiastically. And then when pregnancy results as a result of that unprotected sex, she's supposed to go out and get an abortion, because they think that's all that we all do anyway. They assume all women have had at least 6 abortions, especially they hate, let me tell you who they hate. They hate American women. They hate, sometimes they lump us all together and call us Western women. They highly advocate for these guys to go overseas and get them a European wife. who, quote, knows how to be a wife and respects traditional values. But they hate single moms, they hate American women, and actually really just those two primary categories. Oh, and sluts and whores. And so they kind of just throw all of those into the same bucket. What they're wanting is access to women's bodies for free, for fun, with no consequences. That's how a 12-year-old thinks. That's how 13-year-old little boys think. And my whole thing is, if they would just take responsibility for their portion, then I would have absolutely nothing to say. And most of my focus would go towards the women and saying, please do your best to avoid ever even becoming pregnant by these guys. Please do your best to avoid being in a 5-yard radius of these guys if you can. Anyway, I wanted to bring this whole movement to your attention for those of you who've never heard of it. If this is new to you and you plan on doing some research, just be forewarned of some severe trigger warnings. You're going to see a lot of people you know, not literally, just in terms of thought process, in these comment boards. You're going to be disgusted by a lot of what you read. If you actually attempt to go in there and say something, they're going to jump all over you and they're going to rip you apart, or try to anyway. And it's going to be exhausting and frustrating and sad and scary. It's all of those things. For the mothers listening who have young women in your lives, young teenage girls, educate them on this movement. If you don't educate your women on anything else, educate them on this MGTOW movement, because this will save them a lot of time in their young adult, young female years in dealing with men who think and act this way. And it comes out very subtly. So it's not something that always jumps out right away, but it'll come out with questions on their first date like, do you cook? Don't get me started on that. Whole nother video, totally different series. But what's the problem with that type of question? It's almost like a job interview. So it's not, I'm trying to get to know you, the person, what makes you up, who are you, and ultimately, would we jive as people? It's, what can you do for me? I need to know what you can do for me on the front end. Do you clean? They'll then go even deeper. What do you cook? How often do you cook? Where do you buy? Like, almost like a spoiled customer, almost like a bratty customer. And the only difference is they're not paying for anything. If they had it their way, they wouldn't pay for a single thing. So it's a spoiled, bratty, entitled customer who wants everything for free. And that's essentially what and who the misguided members of MGTOW are. I welcome all comments. Abusive, degrading, nasty comments will be deleted, but you can disagree with me. I would actually love to hear your point of view on this whole perspective. But when you give your point of view, make sure we're all talking about the same group of people. We're not talking about all men, and we're not talking about one half of this group of MGTOW members. We're talking about the defunct bunch, the arrogant, entitled, wishy-washy, irresponsible bunch, spoiled brats, God King complex bunch. That's who we're talking about. So any comments in regard to that group, totally welcome, and welcome in general. Just don't get ugly. Thanks you guys so much for listening. I know this was a longer video, but I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to your thoughts. Take care, and as always, I grant you the permission to exist. Bye-bye.